12-year-old in the temple. We have already discussed some of the significance of Jesus asking and answering questions in the temple. However, there are some other aspects that ought to be considered. The earliest accounts of the practice of Hebrew boys becoming bar mitzvahs do not appear until after Jesus' lifetime. But if there was any similar practice that predated these accounts, which is very likely considering that customs often exist for some time before they are officially prescribed in written form, then this passage makes an even stronger statement about Jesus coming to physical and spiritual maturity. Jesus at one point in his life was an adolescent. Modern adolescents deal with many issues that were unknown in previous times, but the awkwardness of those years has been constant. There may be perhaps no greater word of hope to give to teenagers who are struggling with adolescent issues and a lack of maturity than to remind them that even Jesus endured those same difficult years and used them to serve God. Because of this, God knows the struggles of adolescence, not simply because God knows everything, but because God has indeed encountered those issues in Jesus Christ. If indeed there is some kind of connection between Jesus being found in the temple asking and answering questions and the practice of becoming a bar mitzvah, it also says something about our professions of faith. When a Jewish boy becomes a bar mitzvah, it is a time when they have reached some measure of maturity and become full participants in the community of God's people. In many ways, it is similar to the practice of confirmation as practiced by some traditions. When one becomes a bar mitzvah, they are accountable to the Jewish law. This is important to Christians for a few reasons. First, it reminds us that Jesus was indeed subject to the law. Paul puts it this way, Galatians 4:4-5. But when the fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, so that he might redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption as sons. There's been a tendency to ignore the law, as it is seen to be irrelevant for the Christian life. Whatever conclusion is reached by the individual Christian or larger tradition, it must not forget that Jesus himself practiced Jewish law. There were, of course, times when Jesus' interpretation of the law conflicted with that of the Jewish leaders. Jesus claimed that his interpretation was in line with how God intended the commandment, whereas other interpretations were not faithful to the purpose of the law. It would be more accurate to say that Jesus overturned incorrect interpretations of the law than to say that he overturned the law without qualification. Another important facet to this event is the fact that Jesus has taken even our confession of faith upon his lips. There are times when we profess our faith to others, and it does not match up with the actual unfaithfulness in which we often live. There are times when we claim the name of Christ, and yet in spite of our sincerity, we fail to live up to it. Jesus has made the true and perfect profession of faith, and through the power of the Holy Spirit, we become partakers of that profession. Even our moments of greatest boldness, our greatest confidence in our faith is broken, but acceptable in the eyes of God, because God the Holy Spirit takes our words and actions, even our proclamation of faith, and unites them to the words and actions of Christ, a theme that will be repeated in this work many times, and then presents them, redeemed and healed, to God the Father.